May 1943. Newcastle upon Tyne. The Vickers Armstrong's factory stretched for miles along Scotswood Road, a steel artery feeding Britain's war effort. Inside its vast halls, machines screamed, cranes swung overhead, and thousands of workers labored under relentless schedules. Tanks, guns, and armored vehicles rolled out day and night, most of them familiar, practical, and instantly recognizable. Then one day, everything stopped. Not because of an air raid. Not because of a machinery failure. But because of a vehicle that looked wrong. Engineers, inspectors, and military officers stood silently around a newly completed armored machine. At first glance, it resembled a Valentine tank chassis, squat, compact, and unremarkable. But then the eye moved upward. The gun was pointing backwards. Not slightly offset. Not temporarily rotated for testing. Fully reversed, a long 17-pounder barrel extending over the engine deck, aimed toward the rear of the vehicle. There was confusion. Then disbelief. Then quiet laughter. Someone muttered that the gun must have been mounted incorrectly. Another suggested the blueprints had been read upside down. A few suspected sabotage or sheer incompetence. Yet no alarms were raised. No corrections were ordered. Because this was exactly how it was meant to be. The vehicle was not unfinished. It was not broken. It was not a mistake. It was Britain's answer to a problem that had no conventional solution. By the middle of the Second World War, British armoured doctrine was under severe pressure. Early war assumptions had collapsed. The idea that lighter, faster tanks supported by towed anti-tank guns could hold the line was no longer valid. German armour had evolved faster than expected, and nowhere was this clearer than in North Africa. In late 1942, British units encountered a new enemy vehicle that changed everything. The Tiger I. The Tiger was not numerous, but it didn't need to be. Its sheer presence dominated the battlefield. With 100mm of frontal armor and the devastating 88mm kilowatt K gun, it could destroy British tanks at distances where return fire was ineffective. British anti-tank crews armed with the 6-pounder gun found themselves outmatched. Under perfect conditions, the 6-pounder could penetrate around 90mm of armor at 500 meters. The Tiger's frontal armor exceeded that. Combat reports from Tunisia described shells striking Tigers and shattering harmlessly. Crews fired again and again, hoping for miracles. Some tried dangerously close-range shots. Others aimed desperately for tracks or vision ports. Morale suffered. The Tiger did more than destroy tanks, it destroyed confidence. British soldiers began to view German heavy armor as almost invulnerable from the front. The war had entered a new phase. Britain needed a gun that could kill Tigers reliably, and it needed that gun now. Britain already possessed a potential solution. The Ordnance QF 17-pounder was under development even before the Tiger appeared. Designers understood that armor would continue to thicken, and future battlefields would demand greater firepower. The 17-pounder was a monster compared to earlier British guns. With a caliber of 76.2mm, it fired shells at extremely high velocity. Even with standard armor-piercing ammunition, it could penetrate heavy armor at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. Then came APDS, armor-piercing discarding sabot. These rounds were less accurate and harder to manufacture, but their penetration was extraordinary. Under ideal conditions, they could punch through over 200 millimeters of armor. No German tank was safe. Tigers, Panthers, heavy assault guns, all could be destroyed. But the gun had a fatal flaw. It was massive. Weighing more than 2 tons, with a barrel stretching over 4 meters, the 17-pounder was difficult to move and dangerous to deploy. Towed versions required large crews, exposed positions, and precious time, luxuries rarely available under fire. Britain didn't just need a powerful gun. It needed that gun mounted on armor. Mounting the 17-pounder on a vehicle seemed straightforward, until engineers tried to do it. The Churchill tank was evaluated first. Its heavy chassis could handle the recoil, but integrating the gun proved complex and slow. Production delays made it unsuitable for immediate needs. The Crusader was next. It was fast, but underpowered and outdated. Its suspension and internal space could not support the 17-pounder. The Cromwell showed promise. But modifications would take years. That project eventually evolved into the Challenger tank, but Britain could not afford to wait. Then attention turned to an aging design. The Valentine tank. By 1942, the Valentine was no longer considered effective as a main battle tank. Its gun was underpowered, and its armor insufficient against newer threats. But it had advantages no other chassis could offer. It was reliable. It was compact. And most importantly, it was already being produced in huge numbers. Over 8,000 Valentines had been built. Production lines were stable. Factories knew the design intimately. Spare parts were everywhere. If any chassis could be adapted quickly, it was the Valentine. There was only one problem. The Valentine was too small. An engineering dead end. Early attempts to mount the 17-pounder conventionally on the Valentine were disastrous. The gun's weight made the vehicle dangerously front-heavy. The suspension strained under loads it was never designed to carry. Recoil forces threatened to smash the gun breech into the driver's compartment. The layout was unsafe. The balance was wrong. The design simply did not work. At this point, many engineers would have abandoned the project. But Leslie Little didn't. Instead of forcing the gun into a layout that refused to cooperate, he asked a radical question. What if the gun didn't face forward at all? Turning the gun around. The solution was as shocking as it was simple. Turn the gun around. By mounting the 17-pounder facing rearward over the engine deck, weight distribution improved dramatically. The center of gravity shifted back toward the drive sprockets. Recoil forces no longer endangered the driver. Suddenly, the impossible became possible. The Valentine chassis could carry the gun. Production lines could be reused. Time could be saved. The resulting vehicle looked absurd, but functionally, it worked. The Archer was born. A vehicle designed to disappear. The Archer was never intended to fight like a tank. That distinction mattered. British doctrine classified it not as a tank destroyer, but as a self-propelled anti-tank gun, operated by the Royal Artillery rather than armored regiments. This alone shaped how the vehicle would be used. Unlike turreted tank destroyers, the Archer was not meant to maneuver aggressively under fire. It was not designed to advance with spearhead formations or dual enemy armor in open terrain. Instead, it was built for ambush warfare. The backward-facing gun defined everything about how Archer crews fought. Training manuals emphasized preparation over movement. Crews were taught to select firing positions in advance: reverse slopes, hedgerows, forest edges, village corners, narrow roads, and choke points where enemy armor was forced to expose itself. The process was deliberate. First, the Archer reversed into position, placing the gun toward the expected axis of enemy advance. Second, camouflage was applied: foliage, netting, mud, and sometimes improvised screens. Third, the crew waited. This waiting could last hours, sometimes days. When German armor entered the kill zone, the Archer fired. Then came the moment that justified the entire design. Instead of reversing or rotating, movements that exposed thin side armor, the driver simply accelerated forward. The vehicle vanished in seconds, retreating behind cover without ever turning. No hesitation. No vulnerable pivot. No delay. In a war where survival often depended on seconds, this mattered enormously. Life inside the Archer. For the men who served inside it, the Archer was not comfortable. The fighting compartment was cramped and open-topped. Space was limited. Ammunition storage was tight, with only 39 rounds carried, each one large, heavy, and awkward to handle. The open top exposed crews to the elements. Rain, snow, mud, and freezing winds were constant companions. In winter campaigns, condensation froze on metal surfaces. In summer, heat built rapidly. Enemy artillery and small arms fire were ever-present threats. Shrapnel falling from above was especially dangerous. Yet crews adapted. The low silhouette gave a sense of security. The Archer could hide where other vehicles simply could not. Behind a hedge. Inside a ruined courtyard. On a reverse slope invisible from the enemy's approach. Veteran accounts later revealed a shift in attitude. Initial skepticism gave way to respect, even affection. Crews learned that survival depended not on armor thickness, but on being seen last. One contemporary report noted that crews quickly came to value the backward gun mount, recognizing that it allowed immediate withdrawal without exposing the vehicle. Another described the Archer as awkward to explain, but sensible to fight. The Archer enters the war. The Archer officially entered service in October 1944. By then, the war in Western Europe had changed. The Normandy landings were over. The breakout from the blockage had already occurred. Massive tank battles like Goodwood and Falaise were history. But the war was far from finished. Germany still possessed formidable armored forces, especially in defensive roles. Narrow roads, forests, villages, and prepared positions replaced wide-open maneuver warfare. This environment favored ambush vehicles. The first Archers reached the 21st Army Group in November 1944. Initial deployments were cautious. Units were still learning how best to employ the unusual vehicle. Then came Operation Veritable in February 1945. The Rhineland Test. Operation Veritable was one of the largest Allied offensives of the war. Its goal was to clear German forces west of the Rhine. Conditions were appalling. Heavy rain flooded fields and villages. Roads turned to mud. Large armored vehicles bogged down or were restricted to narrow routes easily covered by enemy fire. This was where the Archer excelled. Imperial War Museum photographs show Archers operating in flooded streets near Kleve and Kranenburg. Their relatively light weight allowed them to traverse ground that heavier tank destroyers struggled to cross. German armor attempting counterattacks found itself ambushed at short notice. The 17-pounder's accuracy and power allowed Archers to engage effectively even in poor visibility. In these engagements, the Archer proved that its design philosophy was sound. It was not about domination, it was about denial. Denying the enemy freedom of movement. Denying armor the ability to exploit breakthroughs. The Italian campaign. While Archers fought in northwest Europe, others were deployed to Italy in 1945. Here, terrain dictated everything. Mountain roads twisted through narrow valleys. Villages clung to hillsides. Engagements occurred at short ranges, often around blind corners and hairpin bends. Large American tank destroyers struggled here. Their size and weight limited where they could go. The Archer thrived. Polish units of the 2nd Polish Corps employed Archers during the final Italian offensive. Their compact dimensions allowed them to be positioned in places German commanders never expected anti-tank guns to appear. From concealed mountain positions, Archers could cover roads and choke points with devastating effect. Enemy vehicles had little warning before coming under fire. In Italy, more than anywhere else, the Archer demonstrated that firepower combined with concealment could outweigh armor thickness. What the Archer could destroy. The question every anti-tank crew asked was simple. What can this gun kill? The answer, for the 17-pounder, was almost everything. British assessments confirmed that Tiger frontal armor could be penetrated at standard combat ranges. Panthers were vulnerable from the sides at long distances and frontally at closer ranges. The Panther's highly sloped glacis plate remained difficult, requiring close-range shots for reliable penetration. But even then, the threat was real. British crews adopted deception tactics. Some Archers were painted with disruptive camouflage patterns to mimic lower-caliber guns, delaying German recognition. This tactic mirrored that used on Sherman Fireflies. German crews often underestimated what they were facing, until the first round struck home. By the time they realized the truth, it was usually too late. Comparison with other tank destroyers. The Archer did not exist in isolation. Germany fielded the Jagd Panzer IV, with sloped frontal armor and a long 75mm gun. It was well protected, but its firepower could not match the 17-pounder. The United States deployed the M10 Wolverine, later upgraded to the Achilles. It offered a rotating turret and better crew comfort, but its gun lacked the raw penetration of the British weapon. Each design reflected different philosophies. The Archer sacrificed armor and flexibility for concealment and lethality. In open battles, it was vulnerable. In ambush, it was devastating. Some British artillery units reportedly preferred their Archers to American vehicles received through Lend-Lease, a remarkable endorsement for such an unconventional design. After the war, the Archer's story did not end in 1945. Large numbers were sold abroad. Egypt acquired around 200 vehicles. Jordan received dozens for the Arab Legion. During the Suez Crisis of 1956, Egyptian Archers were once again committed to combat, 13 years after their design had been questioned. Few wartime vehicles could claim such longevity. The meaning of the Archer. The Archer represents a fundamental truth about military engineering. The best solution is not always the most elegant. Faced with an impossible problem, British engineers abandoned convention. They accepted something that looked wrong, because it worked. The gun was too big. The chassis was too small. The traditional approach failed. So they turned the entire concept around. The result was not beautiful. It was not intuitive. But it was effective. A backward-facing gun mounted on an obsolete tank chassis went on to destroy some of the most feared armored vehicles of the war. That is the Archer. A weapon that confused everyone, until it fired.